Hey everyone, Al Fragnoli, League of Leaders. We got a very special guest with us. You might recognize him. We've had him on a few times before, Dr. Will Ramey. So we're excited to have you back, Dr. Will. Um, I want to take a minute to introduce you to our guests who don't already know you, but as I introduce you here, you are the founder of Shared Leadership LLC, which is a full service leadership and team development solutions company. Will's leadership experience includes various roles as an officer with the U.S. Army, a Fortune 50 company, and senior leadership roles as a Department of Army civilian. He also works as an adjunct professor at Drexel University in their executive leadership program and is currently co-authoring a book on shared leadership, which Will, I'm very excited to see once that's ready to be released to the world. I will be picking it up for sure. So I'm excited to see that. We are excited to have you on with us. Thank you for joining us. We've got a special edition of September 11th, honoring all those who lost their lives in that tragic terrorist attack that happened back in 2001. And with your military background, I thought it only be fitting to bring you on to talk about leadership and the importance of leadership and some of the lessons that you learned in the military. So thank you again, Will, for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to be here, especially for the special edition that you have here. I remember last time, one of the times we talked was Veterans Day. I had the honor to join the show then, and then here for Patriots Day, September 11th. And just to thank you out there to not only those in uniform and military, but our first responders, our military spouses, our first responder spouses, the families and networks of people that support them. Our country wouldn't be as fantastic as it is without them. Stepping up and serving each and every day. So again, thank you so much for having me, Al.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's not just today that we're recognizing them. It's each and every day because our country wouldn't be in the spot that it is without their service and the help of, as you mentioned, their spouse, their support system, their network. It really takes an entire village to make somebody successful. And we truly appreciate everything that the first responders and all the military is doing out there for us. Will, why don't you touch on some of the stories that you have out there on in really empowering leadership, building some positive team dynamics, and really some of those leadership lessons that you learned from your time in the military?
Sure. So, recently, Al, I got into leadership coaching and training, and I've had a lot more conversations with people who are new to leadership roles and talking to them about what their thought is and what they think leadership looks like. A lot of the responses I've gotten back lately is, well, it's the person in charge. It's the person giving and directing and telling people what to do. It's the person who's responsible for the team's performance. And, those comments have stuck with me here recently. It's really given me time to think back and reflect on, is that really how people see leadership? Is that what really people think of when you ask them about what leadership is. So when I look back at what, how I define leadership, I pull from the Army's definition, which is how to influence a group of people to accomplish a shared objective, a shared goal. So as I get deeper and deeper into these conversations, it brought me back to my time as a maintenance recovery team leader when I was in the Army. It was 2005. I was deployed to FOB Spiker, Iraq, into CRIT. Initially, I wasn't assigned to one of these teams. We had some change of assignments, and I got pulled in and asked if I would take over one of the teams as the officer in charge. Now, typically in the military, you think of those military leaders. You think of like General Patton, you think of General Washington, you think of General Colin Powell, and you think of these leaders who are stand up and they're motivational, they're influential, and their personas are larger than life. But when you peel it back, the military is really the U.S. Army specifically has embraced this decentralized mission command style of leadership, and that's all about empowerment because you can't be everywhere on the battlefield at one time. And I learned that lesson firsthand. So when I took over as the officer in charge, our team was set up to go out and recover vehicles in a combat zone. So think about like AAA when vehicles were on the supply routes and got destroyed or damaged or couldn't self-recover, they would call us and we covered a geographical area of responsibility, and we'd have to be up and out within an hour onto the supply routes. And we had some highly trained people. We had people that were trained to drive the Army's version of a tow truck. It was a Hemet wrecker. We had people that were trained to drive the Army's version of an 18-wheeler with a flatbed truck. We had team members at times. A lot of what we went out to recover was not able to be driven. So we had a 40-ton crane that would pick up and move these vehicles and load them on a flatbed truck. And then we had team members that were out there trained in combat life-saving and trained in how to pull security, which is, those are basic soldier tasks. Well, here I am as the OIC, and I don't know how to recover a vehicle. I don't know how to rig a vehicle, how to calculate weight disbursement and all these things, but my soldiers did. So imagine if I embraced that traditional concept of a leader giving orders and directing people. I'd have no idea. My team would be in a world of hurt. They'd be hurting. So I met with my NCOIC, and we talked about what the team's purpose was, what the mission was, how trained they were. I asked him, hey, I'm coming on new. Where do you see we're having hangups? His biggest thing was when we're on site, the previous person in charge wouldn't let go of authority. They made all the decisions. So when you're recovering a vehicle on a supply route in an area of operation in a combat zone, speed is on your side. You need to get out there, speed and security. You need to be quick, and you need to be safe, and you need to be hard in position. So he and I talked, and we broke those functions up. I said, I'll take security. You take the recovery, the technical recovery side. I knew I had to approach this team with a different style of leadership because I wasn't a technical expert. It called for empowering leadership. So my NCOIC and I met with the team, and I let them know, first and foremost, you're the experts. We've got trained experts on how to recover vehicles, how to operate this equipment, and how to tie vehicles down and get them moving again. You let us know what you need. I'll be the person to go get it. I'll be the linebacker blocking, removing roadblocks, whatever you need, that's what we'll do. So automatically right there, we had a sense of purpose for our mission. We had to get out and quickly recover these vehicles so convoys could be moving and our brothers and sisters in arms weren't a sitting duck out there on those supply routes. So we were together with a common purpose. Giving them the reassurance that your job best allowed them to come up with more creative solutions. We gave them voice to be heard, right? And then understanding that, hey, we're going to divide and conquer while we're on the while we're on the objective, allowed them to build confidence and support, seeing that we were splitting things up and we were actually taking what they had to say under consideration and adapting to that. So my team started to come up with very creative solutions. They started to come up with things that they wanted to do to train on in between missions. We ran 2 teams. Each team took a 24-hour shift. So this idea of embracing empowerment, it truly worked. And I'll give you an example. So the way that the up-armored Humvees were built, we had the outside door had an overlap. And a lot of times what we had happen was if we had a vehicle that was rolled over, if we had a vehicle where it was hit with improvised explosive device, or if it was mangled, sometimes those doors wouldn't open. And you got to think too, the turret, the way the mechanics work on a turret, that's a heavy turret. If it's on its side, or if you're upside down, it takes a lot to press that thing open if it's shut. So we needed a way to quick extract people if there was damage to the vehicle and they couldn't get out. So my team came up with, and they designed and fabricated a hooking system on these doors, right? And said we trained with it, we practiced with it, they put it into use, and they felt comfortable coming up with something new and trying something new, right? So it was this whole idea of, I didn't tell them to do that. They had a problem that needs solved. They got I got them the resources. I made sure we had time to train with it, and I made sure they had time to practice with it, and they did. So, the feeling of psychological safety, to where they weren't just waiting for their highest ranking person to tell them something, right? These were private first class, E4s, E5s, specialists and sergeants that were coming up with this. And here you have a first lieutenant and a staff sergeant that was my NCOIC. We're the highest ranking, but the best ideas are coming from the junior people on the team who were closest to it, and they felt comfortable enough bringing that up. So I remember one time it was our last mission we had, and we were actually just doing a handoff with our incoming unit. So we were driving the supply routes, getting them familiar. and we came upon a convoy. They had just wrecked. There was a gravel truck that was hauling gravel. Gravel was spilling out of the back. It was going. They were going fast down the road. A Humvee slid on the gravel, hit the truck. The truck tipped. Humvee behind hit that Humvee and collided. And we literally just rolled up on it as it happened. And this is the power of empowerment, of giving our team the intent and the left and right limits to run with it. As soon as we came up on there, immediately my combat lifesavers jumped out and started helping the soldiers that were banged up, beat up, bruised up from the wreck. I went to find the person in charge of the convoy. My NCOIC was on the radio, calling back to our battalion headquarters, letting them know what was going on, and calling in air support, letting them know we were in the area. And unfortunately, we had a soldier that was in this convoy that was wounded, and they're on the passenger side of the Humvee. Their front right leg was pinched between the chassis and the overlap of the door. So my team said, "Great, hey, let's use our hook." Right? They had it. They trained with it. They were confident. Let's use our hook. So they go to assess the situation. Right? So I'm thinking this creativity on the spot. We get the other people taken care of. We set up security. We have air support called, and we called for a medical evacuation helicopter to get this guy out, because he was, you could see broken bone. You can see he was in pain, bleeding profusely. We needed to get him care and attention. So my guys go to use the hook. I said, "What do you need from me?" Because at the time, I'm the person in charge. Where do you need me most? I said, "We need you on top." So I got on top of the Humvee trying to take some weight off this door for him. What they found out, they put the hooks on. The hooks weren't going to work because of the pinch point. So when I say the power of empowerment, they, in a 30 seconds time frame, had a second course of action ready to go. They said, "Okay, this isn't going to work. We have a fire blanket and an oxyacetylene torch. We can cut the bolts off the door to get the door off the Humvee to get this guy's leg unstuck and out of the vehicle." Great. Where do you need me? So we shoved the fire blanket in. I'm on top of the Humvee with a tanker bar. I'm pulling back. Security team's got security set. The other people are already taken care of. All of a sudden, the helicopter lands. The door comes off. We're able to get this soldier on the litter, and they took him away to the helicopter. Come to find out later on, saved his leg, no problem, healed up just fine, right? So I think about that, and I think about, geez, if I were to hold all of the decision making to myself, how much time would that have cost? Would I have frozen? Would I have not been able to make a decision? Would I have not been able to take in input for everything else? Right? So when we look at empowerment, my team had purpose. Because they had operated under that condition, they were able to quickly adapt and come up with a creative solution to a problem that needed solved literally in the minute. And they did that, and they did it well. Right? So when I look back at what happens sometimes when leaders hold all the cards and they give all of the direction and they just task, right? So that team then becomes, what do you do? A researcher, so I'll just sit back and wait for you to tell me what to do next, right? So if we can do that under those conditions, and me as a leader can, and there was no question, I owned responsibility for what was happening for that team. I was 100% accountable for what was happening on that team. There was no question of that. You can't delegate my accountability. What I could delegate out to them was, hey, we're going to all own performance. We're going to all own what happens out here. We're going to all own a piece of our team processes. We're going to all own the dynamics under which we operate. And I gave that team space to do that. That was probably one of the best teams I've worked on in my military career, my professional career, because there was trust, mutual support, communication, creativity, problem solving. And I'm proud to say that we came home, everybody in one piece. Everyone came home alive, and our team was probably one of the best performing recovery teams. I'd put them down against anybody, bar none, by the time we were done with deployment.
Will, I love those stories that you just shared. I'm gonna tell you why. There's a couple of things that always intrigue me when I'm really talking to you and we get deep into some military background and experience that you have. But I think all of us can relate to an experience in where we've worked where the C-suite people are thinking that they need to have all the answers. They need to be in charge at all times, and that's really not the case. And you just shared some really, really important examples with our audience on why. And when we learn from the military and the leadership styles that are implemented from the military, to me, they're so impactful because you mentioned speed and safety a lot and what you were talking about. And it really, when we talk leadership around the military, it's life or death in a lot of instances. And you shared an example that ended very positively, but it could have went the other way if the leader was so focused on them being in control and having all the answers. It's okay as a leader, as a CEO, to say, I don't have all the answers, but the people that I surround myself are all intelligent and I expect them to provide input. And that really happens in a safe work environment where people feel empowered. You mentioned that a lot as well. When they feel empowered to share their thoughts and ideas, that's when a team really comes together and really has the ability to thrive. And I love some of those short stories that you shared. So it sounds like you've had lots of experience working in strong team dynamics with strong leadership. Why don't you share some other stories with our audience about some of those team dynamics that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I have I have one more that comes to mind for sure. The So it's interesting in my career, I have never done the work of the team members on my team. So right, so I've led the recovery team. I was never a wrecker operator. I've never maintained, I was never a maintenance a mechanic. I was never a technician. Uh, in 2009, 2010, I was an officer in charge for a space operations crew. And what we did, and yes, out there, the Army has space elements. It's not just a space force. The Army does a lot of work in space. When you think of the battlefield, we need to be able to understand those satellite communication links and make sure we have assured comms and imagery and intel, things like that. So it's interesting. People say air, oh, Space Force. No, it's Army space. I actually earned my Army space badge, which is oddly similar to some Star Trek elements there, but good time. Anyhow, back on track. So I was an officer in charge of the space crew. So we had signals analysts, we had IT specialists, and we had satellite communication equipment operators. I had never done any of that before. So again, how am I going to lead this crew to operate our equipment and our systems if I've never done the job? And what hit the other thing that hit was we were a new unit, so we were just getting stood up, we were just getting staffed, we were just getting soldiers in, and these soldiers that were coming in were straight from the schoolhouse, 90% of them. So they were 19, 20 years old, hadn't been in an Army unit before, just out of basic training, and the schoolhouse for them was like 36 to 52 weeks long to learn this technical training that they were doing. So the dynamics we needed to operate that equipment under, it was tight conditions, it was close quarters. So you needed to get along, you needed to be cohesive, you needed to trust each other, you needed to have a little bit of sense of humor because they're long hours, long shifts, things like that. So good friend of mine, Markin Orser. Markin was the detachment commander for us there. He and I worked very closely together, and my NCOSC Sergeant Jeff Flora, the three of us got together and said, okay, how are we gonna tackle this bear of bringing this newly formed team together, and how are we gonna build this cohesion and trust and support that we need when we're operating our equipment, when we're performing our mission? And it really started with everything outside of that. So we made time for, I'll call them social moments. In the Army, it's we had physical training. So one or 2 days a month when we had physical training, we would plan something fun off-site. So we were in Colorado Springs, we'd go run Garden of the Gods. So we do our PT, but we're out in a park-like environment looking at these huge monoliths and these rock formations, right? We'd run the trails around Pikes Peak, and we'd get out and about, and then afterwards we'd talk and we'd do things. when we had our because we were an Army Reserve unit, when we had our Thanksgiving or Christmas drill, we would come together and put together a special meal. The other thing we started doing inside of the operating environment was when we were going through our training, because we had a small team and each person there was not a lot of redundancy with function. So we gave the soldiers opportunity to cross train and brief each other on a technical aspect of their job. So what we were doing was, we're giving our team members, our crew members, voice. We're showing them that what they know and how they contribute matters, and we're giving them the opportunity to be in the lead, to step up and be the expert as they're training others on their technical function. So we have created this cohesive team that gives and takes learning, it gives and takes leadership and influence. Because the IT person doesn't know necessarily how the satellite communication equipment operates, but they know they need to link into it. The signals analyst reads the output of that equipment, so they need to have an understanding of, if the output isn't proper, how do I backtrack that to see if there's a trouble in the link, or do I just go ask Chris, or do I just go ask Sean? Well, no, you've got to work together on that. So giving them the opportunity to step up and own their task helped us to provide better cross training, cross function performance, and really brought that team together to be cohesive. So when you look at building team dynamics, what stood out for me on that was, again, through empowerment, was giving people opportunity to be heard, giving them the voice, taking time for those social moments, taking time to check in on how they're doing. I could still go back. This crew was the last crew that I led in the Army, and on my desk at work, I have a signed picture that they gave me when I left, and it was very touching to me that you had that impact on them, and that's how close knit we were. We came together, and I could tell you something personal about each and every one of them. Right. And at the same time, I also gave them the space to be who they are and set them on a path to success. We did that together, and we did that through teamwork. So we have those opportunities at work each and every day. Get out of your office, go check on somebody, do your startup meeting, talk to people, ask them how they're doing, be invested in who they are and who they're trying to become professionally, be invested in how they show up for work that day. It might be something happened with their dog the other night, and that's why they're kicking rocks at work in the morning. Take time to understand those things. And those are the dynamics that will really take your team to the next level.
Will, I always get intrigued by some of the information that you share, and I really love some of the stories that you shared with us today. But, you mentioned more on really empowering your team, getting to know them on a personal level. We've talked about that in the past extensively too. And I think a lot of leaders sometimes struggle with that fact of, you have to take that time to really invest in your people and get to know them. You just mentioned a prime example of getting a signed photo from all the team members and how much that means to you. And it's little things like that that go a long way, but that shows that you were invested in each and every single one of them. And that's ultimately what leadership is all about. The way we define a leader and whether or not they've been successful is not, about the financials coming in each and every day and making sure we're making tons of money. All that's gravy, but you really define a leader by seeing how many people below them develop and become great leaders. That's what it's all about. We want to, as leaders, empower, again, using your keywords there, empower others to be leaders. You mentioned the cohesiveness of your team, giving them a voice, allowing them to be in the lead and take that lead, right? Owning their own tasks, social moments, all those things were so key in developing strong team dynamics. And again, can't thank you enough, Will, though, for coming on with us. You shared amazing stories. We're just trying to bring positive light out into the world on how to be the best leader that we can. And the things that we learn from you are always impactful. So thank you again for taking time out of your day to talk to us on such a special day here for our country. We appreciate it, Will.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. Appreciate everything going on. And thanks for the opportunity to have a voice and share things out there. Hopefully it reaches somebody who's open to hearing it and helps.
Absolutely. Can't thank you enough. As always, it's a pleasure to talk with you, Dr. Will Ramey. We always are learning from you. So thank you again for coming on. And I'm sure we'll be chatting with you again in the coming months here as well. But always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks again, Will.
Thanks, Al. Take care.